at places of their choosing and demonstrate to the Iraqi leadership that they do not have control in a fashion that they continue to say they do on their television. And I think we made that point.
Kind of testing the mood, sir?
I have a great mood.
But some Iraqi forces are still fighting. American tanks fought a fierce battle with a Republican Guard unit inside a barracks southwest of Baghdad. Iraq claims hundreds of Americans have been killed in the battles around Baghdad airport, but today's pictures from there show US Marines apparently in control and consolidating their position.
The Iraqi civilians, according to Army intelligence, and they've been watching them very closely, particularly the Ba'athist Party members of the Saddam Hussein regime, and also some officers of the Iraq Republican Guard, are fleeing the city. One officer said it was a mass exodus, and they are describing pictures from the air that U.S. aircraft have seen of Iraqi army trucks embedding themselves, insinuating themselves in civilian convoys so that they cannot be attacked in the air, and they're all heading in a northwesterly direction, the general direction of Syria, perhaps to seek refuge there. We must say that in the past 24 hours, the Army has repeatedly interdicted Iraqis who are fleeing, and they've had suitcases full of money with them. Mark? In point of fact, I checked on that alleged suicide bombing at the airport. The Army says it did not happen. As for the Iraqi information minister's claims that there has been an American defeat, I have not, in 2 weeks of heavy fighting, seen any dead or even wounded American soldiers in our theater of operation. I have unfortunately seen scores and scores of Iraqi soldiers' bodies littered, lying in the roads and fields where the 7th Cavalry had moved through.
Reality the Iraqi government wants us to see. Loyal troops sending patriotic greetings from the front line. A burnt-out Iraqi armoured vehicle in the south of the city. They turn defeat to victory, praising their president. The government says the Americans aren't advancing at all.
We crushed the forces in Saddam International Airport, and we cleaned the whole place of the airport by our Republican Guard. Now the Republican Guard is in full control of Saddam International Airport.
This is the reality we see from the hotel. Artillery pieces being towed through the streets, cheering soldiers showing off their loyalty. We don't know where they're going, nor whether they'll survive the night. Shrinking enclave, tanks, the first armour we've seen in the centre of the city. More that we're not allowed to show. Anti-aircraft missiles, armoured personnel carriers full of soldiers. We arrive at a suburb hit last night with several wounded. The Civil Defence Department collects the remaining ordnance before a child tries to pick it up. From the first floor we can see what they might have been aiming at. On the waste ground beyond the hedge, marks from a tracked vehicle where the bomb landed. There's a crater there now. In the afternoon, a new statement from the president is read on TV and radio.
I say to you, your Baghdad can bear more than has been thrown at it so far. God will protect it as a symbol of honor and faith and jihad, even if it faces heavier attacks.
Those meant to defend the center of Baghdad go through the motions. The Home Guard preparing for the unknown. It's routine now. But tomorrow, a different and very frightening reality may catch up with them.
Dominating the city gates to Basra, Saddam Hussein and his henchmen still claim to control this southern port. But the British want to send a powerful symbolic message. Soldiers are here to tear down the regime and all it stands for. By the time they leave Iraq, they're determined Saddam and his Ba'ath Party will have bitten the dust. The approach can seem frustratingly slow, but day by day, the desert rats are exerting more control. Checkpoints meant to filter out Iraqi hardliners.
They're well within striking distance of the mortars and rockets of the Fadaim militia, but they're prepared to take that risk to try and persuade the people of Basra that they won't desert them, that they'll stick with this, however messy it gets.
Drastic action is needed to convince a dubious population. We watched a nighttime raid on the homes of Ba'ath Party officials and Fadaim militia. These are men singled out by locals and believed by army intelligence to be behind much of the brutality and corruption. Most are not accused of specific crimes, but suspected of being part of the state-sponsored climate of fear.
Come on, get up!
The party's influence extends to every corner of Iraqi society. In 2 small communities, we witness more than 70 people being rounded up. Some are clearly terrified of what lies ahead, uncertain of their fate, overcome by nerves. But as it ended, there was no British apology for the scale of the operation.
We came in firm, we came in fair. There was no shots fired. We gave a good warning before we came in. We've been playing warnings for people to stay in their houses, and we've only lifted those people who we've got very good intelligence on.
This is not a tactic that can be regularly repeated, or the British risk being accused of installing their own rule of terror. Despite the discomfort of a few, there's a conviction that this is a night's work that will benefit the majority.
Right there. Did you get it? Yeah.
One barely missed a British tank.
Oh, they're tearing that intersection up, dude.
There were at least 10 more impacts, but the Special Forces A team had moved just out of the mortar's range.
Definitely ain't gonna get to shoot. Where the hell did that one hit? Right there.
Part of the team moved forward for a closer look. The rest of the unit provided cover and scanned nearby buildings, bridges, and highways for the Iraqi mortar.
Here comes an F-18 coming in for an airstrike.
An F-18 streaked overhead, but British commanders who controlled this part of the Iraq war theater did not give the order for it to attack. Back at the checkpoint in Basra, where traffic and war intersected, more than 20 Iraqi rocket-propelled grenades were discovered in a bunker. The order was given to destroy them.
All right, let's tape it up on the deck board.
American and British intelligence believe Iraqi units have stashed weapons throughout Basra for use against any coalition advance. It would soon be dark. The Iraqi mortar team was still at large, so the SF team wasted no time preparing their explosive charge.
All right, no twist, no turn. Hey, Captain, tell them Brits we're getting ready to pull the igniters.
What's the time fuse? What do we got?
We got about 3 minutes. About 3 minutes. We didn't have time to test it.
All right, pull it on.
All right, you got it, Tim? Get ready to go. Smoke on 1. Smoke on 2.
Yep.
Let's go, load up. Get on the fucking truck and go.
Roger, you're advised. We have friendlies all over. I need you to positively identify.
In the race to get away from the impending detonation, our driver avoided running over an unexploded mortar. A British armored vehicle did not. It was disabled. The dark cloud in the distance marked its location.
Do we have any friendlies on the
Then
south?
a second detonation, the Iraqi arms cache.
On the south side of the bridge.
The soldier on the .50 caliber was right. It was not a quiet day, all for a checkpoint, a temporary checkpoint.
This was the moment American tanks took the battle to the heart of Baghdad's elite defenders, confronting the Republican Guard in their own barracks. This was an operation designed to hit Iraqi morale and also to deliver a stark message. America now controls such a large slice of the country. They can hit wherever and whenever they choose.
180 break.
Backed up by airstrikes, the tanks of the 3rd Infantry Division mounted this lightning raid from their stronghold at Baghdad International Airport.
But bottom line is we're defending the airport from the movement coming into Baghdad, and I'm searching and attacking up the road. The best defense is the best offense. We're continuing combat operations.
This operation began shortly after dawn as a column of tanks and armoured cars set off on a dash along Route 8. This is the main road from the airport right to the centre of Baghdad. Their mission to clear the route of defences, with Iraqi troops dug in along the length of the road. Those with no stomach for the fight surrender. American soldiers frantically signalling to this man to show he has no weapons. He removes his gas mask and then lies down as instructed.
And there's another soldier behind who also surrenders.
Then a shout goes up from one of the tanks not to fire, as another emerges from the bushes, his hands held high. Both are wearing the green trousers of the Republican Guards. The Americans say a number of vehicles on the road tried to ram the convoy and were fired upon. Burnt-out remains littered the side of the carriageway. One determined and seemingly suicidal assault ended abruptly on the central reservation.
There weren't many civilians around. It seemed kind of...
One US tank was hit by a rocket, but its crew escaped uninjured. The wreckage providing Iraqi gunmen with one of their few causes for celebration today. On the other side of Baghdad, US Marines were also drawing ever closer to the city centre. After this assault on Iraqi positions in the southeast suburbs, dugouts were overrun and hundreds of Iraqis taken prisoner, some of the injured being treated by American medics.
We'll check it out. Check right now. All right.
Looks like it's a shoulder wound.
Yeah. We got one big one right here. Looks like it went this way. Yeah. Up. Might gone up. Yeah. Check it.
Senior officers warn there are still many tough battles ahead, but the Americans are closing in on the heart of Saddam's regime. Harry Smith, ITV News.
They pass Iraqi prisoners heading south from the battlegrounds near Baghdad. Lorries and buses are being filled with Iraqi conscripts and officers. Tents to hold them are being put up fast. Bulldozers are pushing out the camp boundaries. Already it's proving difficult to process the numbers here. This is the biggest prisoner of war camp in Iraq, and it's getting bigger day by day. Its growth a measure of the coalition's success. It now holds 7,000 Iraqi prisoners, but within a few days that will grow to 10,000.
We have got something like 300 to 500 officers here. The most senior, I think, is a brigadier general, and we do have some Ba'ath Party members here.
So senior people that can give you information if necessary?
Yes, that's right. But in the main, we've got other ranks, and it's fair to say that most people are happy to be here from the soldiers.
Across the south, Iraqis are giving themselves up or being captured. We saw this militiaman caught this morning. Saddam's paramilitaries are being picked up by the handful, but they all end up in the same camp. Confiscated weapons lie scattered on the outskirts. Inside, the Allies are getting information from these men, most of them conscripts. They have survived the battles for Qasr, Nasiriyah and Najaf. Soon others who have survived the battle for Baghdad will join them. The pace of events in Iraq has taken everyone by surprise. Lorries, tanks, helicopters and tens of thousands of British and American troops are now racing to take Iraq's two main cities, to hammer home the advantage of this momentum, to hammer a final nail in the coffin of Saddam's regime. Bill Neely, ITV News, with the Royal Marines on the outskirts of Basra.
The children of Qasr want only one thing.
Water!
We toured the town today, besieged everywhere we went by the same demand. As the temperature touched 100 degrees Fahrenheit, water tankers from a nearby pipeline were mobbed by frantic townsfolk. But there simply aren't enough of these lorries to supply everyone. Many have to use this well, hard work in the baking sun, and the brackish water drawn up, not fit for drinking.
There might not be a humanitarian crisis here in Qasr, but there is, as you can see, a desperate shortage of water. And as the temperature gets hotter every day, that need becomes ever more pressing.
In the local hospital, we've found squalid conditions, and once again the taps weren't working. Not a single drop in the entire building. We found this patient, a young boy with a badly broken arm. The x-ray showing a horrible fracture. Until we'd arrived, there'd been no water to make the plaster cast. We gave them the small amount we had with us, allowing them to set his arm as best they could. Despite the hardship, the hospitality of the local families was undiminished. Over tea, they told me they didn't care what was happening in Baghdad. All they worry about is food and water. Since the war started, the men of the household no longer have jobs. They say war has brought nothing but hardship.
There's a chronic shortage here, particularly of water, a dire diet. I mean, there's enough food, but it's desperate. And people, you know, the questions of politics in Baghdad, it's a long, long way from here to the capital.
The coalition forces have been here for a fortnight and some aid is arriving. More is promised, but the need is huge. It's not regime change that people here are concerned about, it's food and water. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Qasr, southern Iraq.
Send pictures or actual video, and then they can make decisions if they want to maybe avoid that area or go ahead and go out and engage those folks.
Dodging missiles and AAA fire is something new to this squadron. However, protecting forces on the ground isn't.
These men are about 3 hours into their mission and the sun is starting to set. They've just come across one of the Marine convoys that they need to track. So they're watching every move that the Marines make as they move towards Baghdad, making sure they don't come across any type of threat.
We're getting closer to it.
Also on this mission, Marine Colonel Jim Lukeman and Sergeant Emilio Hernandez. They are tracking and talking to their fellow Marines on the ground.
2 vehicles move across the bridge,
making sure they don't get ambushed.
Well, I'm looking for enemy positions out to the front. We'll look at the routes ahead of where our guys are going to go and try to see what enemy is there.
Lukeman is warning his troops about a bridge ahead. He doesn't like what he sees. The Gray Knights fly closer and grab a clearer picture.
There's some vehicular traffic so that we know the bridge is still intact. They may be Iraqi military. So now that the Marine Division on the ground has that information, they'll take that action. They'll take action tactically on it.
These flights can last up to 15 hours, but it's the minutes of real-time intelligence that completes the mission.
When you're on the ground fighting, every piece of information you've got about what you're coming up against is golden.
Commander Steve Croteau brings his crew home after locating enemy positions and surface-to-surface missiles.
It keeps the Marines safe, and one more safe Marine is one more Marine that can continue on north to Baghdad.
Flying over Iraq, Kira Phillips, CNN.
Saddam Hospital. Saddam Hospital is where Jessica Lynch, the American POW, was rescued by U.S. Special Forces just a few days ago. Today, the Marines were embedded with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. They recovered her dog tags. They recovered these tags from what they believe is the residence of a Ba'ath Party member. They found it in this residence along the river as they were looking for arms, various types of munitions that they also recovered in that same position. As the Marines make these discoveries, and they've made quite a number of these arms cache discoveries, in fact, they say it slowed them down from doing the rest of the work that they want to do because there's so much of these arms here for them to deal with. But as they do that, they're operating in a very changed climate and a changing climate. People here in some quarters are giving them quite a reception. We had an opportunity earlier to speak with some Iraqis who were thrilled by their presence in the city.
No like Saddam? No like Saddam.
Do you like Bush?
Maybe.
Bush. What's that? Bush? Do you like Bush?
Maybe.
Bush? Marines. U.S. Marines.
Good.
U.S. Marines good.
Good, yeah. Yes, good.
Good. Bush is good?
Good. Maybe good. Good Bush. Good Bush.
Yes, USA. Yes.
In juxtaposition to those Iraqis that you just saw, earlier we spoke with some Iraqis who are inside Saddam Hospital. There's some images we're showing you here of Iraqis who were injured in aerial bombardments. We spoke with one, a 20-year-old, who said he was eating cereal in the kitchen of his home when he heard helicopters overhead. Then a loud explosion. His father was killed in the blast, and he's been in the hospital and will likely be in this hospital for quite a long time with his injuries. Some very tragic injuries witnessed inside of that hospital and some very tragic stories. Tragedy that's come with this war. I'm Jason Bellini, CNN, Nasiriyah, Iraq.
Returned from this checkpoint. You drove up
It's
here.
like running through deep sand in leg irons.
My name? Alan.
Oh, Tristan. That's Tristan, yeah. Checkpoint after checkpoint, delay after delay, papers and more papers. The International Rescue Committee on its first recon into Qasr.
We've got freedom of movement to the local area.
Security briefing. The NGOs need that because in the wrong environment they could do more harm than good.
They've got now abundance of water.
They head up the road to check out the water plant. No soldiers for escort, no helmets, no body armor. Those would give the wrong message.
Even prior to the war, this place was probably not the best of condition, but it seems to function.
They find the military assessment was a little too upbeat.
There are 3 top priorities here. Number 1, water. Number 2, water. Number 3, water. And this plant has not put out drinkable water for more than 12 years.
The flow down from Basra to the north is weak. He says it's because people are breaking into the pipeline for water.
The limit's 2,000.
A water specialist gets to work and finds it not only unpleasant, but unsafe. But even filtered and chlorinated, it's several times too salty. That's because new irrigation dams up the Tigris and Euphrates have drained the rivers so much they can no longer hold back the seawater from the Gulf. Nothing IRC can do about that. They head north. And half an hour up, they find farmers tapping the water line. And drinking it too, they say, because it's all they have. Back in Qasr, water is literally like money. British forces fill tankers from a pipeline out of Kuwait, but the problem is getting enough out to 60,000 people. Angry people here say there'll be trouble if things don't improve in the next couple of days.
If water is an issue in Qasr, we can imagine it's going to be a much more significant issue, pressing issue in Basra, Nasiriyah.
And it's a long, long way to Baghdad. Richard Blystone, CNN, Qasr.
Taken over by coalition forces. He is an expert on chemical and biological warfare. His job is to protect the forces here against that potential.
We can detect from up to 5 kilometers, and we can actually predict which way the vapor hazard is traveling.
The threat level at this base was lowered on Saturday, allowing service members to take off the chemical suits they'd been wearing for days. But those in charge of keeping the base safe are not relaxing, not yet.
It has decreased, but it's not gone away. Okay, so I have my systems up running 24 hours a day so we can detect something if it was to happen.
The U.S. Army is in charge of detection and decontamination. It uses sophisticated and highly mobile technology.
Vehicles like these are among the first lines of defense in case of chemical or biological warfare. The information gathered here is used to warn those who might be in harm's way.
They operate in the battlefield or in areas like this one, where discoveries made when the base was taken over made many people nervous.
There's reports all throughout the airbase. There's all kinds of NBC gear in most of these buildings. We found 2 different kind of masks. One's an aviator mask that has a full frontal face shield.
The Iraqi protection gear was handed over to Iraqi POWs currently being held at the base so they too could be protected in case of attack. The possibility of chemical and biological attacks is very much on the minds of the base's current occupants.
It's there. We're still waiting. Hopefully they don't use it. If all we do is sit here and all we do is do our job and we're not very busy, that's good. But if we get busy, that's kind of a bad thing. So hopefully we will remain status quo.
A fervent wish from soldiers who have already dramatically altered the status quo here. Harris Whitbeck, CNN in South Central Iraq.
By a special force unit. I can't tell you where they're operating from for security reasons, but I can tell you they were directing in over the past several hours this evening F-15 strike planes and B-52 bombers. I watched the pattern of a B-52 in contact with the ground controllers, them calling in the B-52, flying very high altitude. It made 4 bombing runs against a whole series of bunker positions along a ridge. Each run, they were dropping 7 500-pound bombs.
Baghdad, as shells rain down on units of the Republican Guard and other military targets. American military planners continue to warn that there could still be tough fighting ahead. But tonight, they're closer than many believed they would be to the center of Saddam's regime. Harry Smith, ITV News.
We're right here to maintain this major service route into Baghdad open. Special Forces activity, of course, in this region. Here, continuing to look for weapons of mass destruction, processing plants, and doing reconnaissance. In the west, coalition forces still maintain control of the air.